I wasn't going to take a call on this, but I decided to when I understood that Graham Dingle had actually put forward a proposal on this to undertake this. Now, the reason I wanted, but it was awarded to the Army. Now, the reason I want to talk about this is I was actually one of Graham Dingle's mentors in Project K. What this was about was taking youth at risk and actually providing a sort of a mentoring environment, a supportive environment. And I want to tell you about my little fellow that I looked after. He was from a very poor family, of that there's no doubt. They ate KFC 3 times a week. He was slightly undernourished. He had asthma, and yet his mother and her partner smoked 2 packets of cigarettes between them a day. But the thing I understood was that this mother actually wanted what was best for her son. This mother understood that this little boy was going off the rails, but she wanted to try anything. She was prepared to try anything to make sure that her son did not end up in jail like this fellow's father. And this is the sort of project that Graham Dingle ran. It was a supportive project. It was about mentoring. It was about bringing the best out of kids. It was not sort of locking them up and saying, okay, you're going to get fitter, you're going to get faster, and go away, and after 6 months we'll see you in another 12. When you're over 18 you can go into jail. This was turning kids around. It was such a positive experience that I learned a lot about myself as well as a lot about this little fellow. Now, I want to talk about that in a slightly different way, and I want to continue with the quote that my colleague, the Honourable Leanne Dalzell, was in the process of giving before her time was up. This is Professor Gluckman. There is the beginning of the recognition that there is a far greater need for evidence to be rigorously based and inform policy formation. Although I hasten to say there can be many cogent reasons why evidence and policy not align. The evidence may not be complete, the public may not accept the evidence, it may conflict with the accepted values of a society, the cost implications may be contrary to the approach associated by the evidence, and ultimately the democratic process will put constraints on decisions that can be made. However, what he says, and I quote, "The important point, however, is not to deny the evidence but to acknowledge it and explain when and why policies are developed and not in accord with the evidence. How we can approve the use of evidence by government." He went on to say that his goal is to try in an unbiased way to look at the evidence that explains why New Zealand adolescents have such high morbidity, second only to the USA, and to identify what we know about childhood and adolescence which might impact on policy settings in health, education, social welfare, justice that might lead to better outcomes. Now, Mr Chair, I acknowledge and I understand the need to seriously address the problems of youth offending. I think we all agree with that. It's just how we go about it. I think first and foremost what we actually need to do is address the problems of disaffected youth in the first place. Now, back to my little fellow, what was happening with a lot of his friends and a lot of his peers is they had lost their cultural identity. So once you lose your cultural identity, it's a very short step to losing your personal identity. And from there, just a short step to losing the ability to aspire, where you don't care about anything, you don't see any prospects for you at all, there's no vision, there's no ability to appreciate value of other people's property, and there what you get is you get the graffitiing, you're getting the violence, you're getting all these things from disaffected youth in our society and our communities which should not be there. There are policies that Labor put in place to address these. Now let's look at the policies that this government has put in place that actually do not address poverty. Tax cuts, for example. What this government did is they gave tax cuts that anyone under $40,000 per year, we're talking about 75% of people in the Napier electorate, for example, did not get one tax cut. What these sort of policies do, and the sort of tax proposal we've got on the table at the moment, is they just widen the gap between the most privileged in our society and the most vulnerable. And what that does is it reinforces stereotypes, and it comes back again to a lack of ability to aspire. And this is an absolute death knell for a lot of our young kids and a lot of our communities. We need policies that alleviate this. When I hear that the minimum wage went up by 25 cents, who earns the minimum wage? It's people working 2, 3, sometimes even 4 jobs because they need to work 24/7 to put food on the table, clothes on the back, and occasionally provide school books. What's happening is these children, as identified by, I think it was Tim McIndoe, are growing up without parents because their parents need to work these horrendous hours, earning dreadful salaries just to survive. It's a vicious circle, and what we need to do as a parliament, in fact our role as parliamentarians is to provide policies that alleviate poverty, and I'm just not seeing that from the other side.
No.